Good morning, everyone. Virgo here. It is August 12th, 2020. I haven't done an actual podcast in a while, and I decided I'm going to do one of those. And this podcast is just going to actually be a reading of a story that was written by a group of individuals off of a website called Narratively. I'm going to link everything to the description of this video for you, but I wanted to read this out for you guys. I think this is very important. This story is called My Father, the QAnon Conspiracy Theorist. Many times people don't actually realize how serious it gets when people fall for particular conspiracies and then start linking them together with other conspiracies, almost always ultimately finding themselves down a rabbit hole they can't dig themselves out of. They get into those underground tunnels and get lost, and as a result, their family members are left holding the bag, trying to figure out how to dig them out, how to help them help themselves. And quite often, people get lost and refuse any help provided or offered. So, this particular party, this is a story that was written by Reed Riley Grable, and it's extremely good. I want to go ahead and read it to you guys, although it's a little bit lengthy, because it's something that I feel like would be very helpful for many people to hear. Particularly people that are involved with the conspiracy that they're talking about here, being Q, and then of course other conspiracies, like many of the Sovset conspiracies. And although most of the time we don't actually call them conspiracies, they really are all scams. I'm working on a video currently that's going to be put out very shortly here, where I can actually link you all the way back from the Q scam back to the Omega investment scam, and in between there, the Nasara scam. And they're all very similar in nature in terms of how they run. This particular scam is something that has grabbed hundreds, I'll say, of thousands of individuals over the entire nation and even beyond our nation. It's extremely sad what's happened to many people and how many people they've lost. But what's even more concerning is what their families go through while this is all taking place. My Father, the QAnon Conspiracy Theorist story says, after my parents got divorced, Dad began a slow slide into isolation. Eventually, he found consolation in the darkest corners of the web. Can I help him get back out? That leads into the story that I'm about to read. Please follow along. I know that podcasts can be a little tiresome when you don't have a nice slideshow or something that goes along with them, but this is an important one. It's also a very good story. And I don't have anything to prove that this is real. But I will tell you that after following many conspiracy theories over the years, as the Virgo Triad channel has done, it sounds just exactly like a lot of the stories that I've heard in the past. It's March 14th, 2020. And my dad hurries to my brother's house to warn him that the government is going to be seizing things. Rarely has my dad ever gone to my brother's house, especially unannounced. I'm worried about you, my brother tells him, and I wish the reason you came over was to say hi, like a normal person. Here we go again, my dad says. He tells my brother to take what he's saying with a grain of salt and then leaves in a hurry. It is then that my brother and I both realize my dad is lost in an abyss of conspiracy theories. Chapter 1. The Alien in the Pickle Jar. A slender green toy alien sits inside a water-filled pickle jar in my dad's garage, perched on a wooden ledge in front of old Christmas and birthday cards pinned to a wall. Photos of my brother, sister, and I when we were younger are there too, along with drawings we made in kindergarten. Beneath this green plastic being, mechanic tools litter the ledge. Dust covers everything: nuts, bolts, wrenches, ratchets, sockets, and the pickle jar. This toy alien in the pickle jar has been in my dad's garage for as long as I can remember. Its black oval eyes peer out at its surroundings, while its small black hole of a mouth makes it look like it's gasping for breath. As the years have gone by, its green color has blended into the water, giving the alien a murky appearance. The alien is isolated from the rest of the world by very thin glass. Viewers can peer in and see its suffering. Someone could easily untighten the lid, pour out the water, and the alien would finally be free, but no one ever has. Much like the alien trapped in the pickle jar, my dad has become trapped, not behind glass, but in his own mind. My dad is a conspiracy theorist. Among other things, he firmly believes that aliens exist and that the government is keeping that fact from the public. This interest has grown to consume his thoughts, and his idea of reality has become distorted. Isolation, a lack of close friends and family, the internet, and poor influences have caused him to doubt the reality of the world. In the past year, it's become difficult to even have a normal conversation with him. Also, in the past year, he's found a network that affirms his beliefs. This network is destroying his life and relationships with those around him, and it is known as Q. Q is a far-right conspiracy theorist group with enough influence and reach that the FBI has called them a terror threat. Its members were the driving force behind Pizzagate, the conspiracy theory that poised that Bill and Hillary Clinton were running a child sex trafficking ring in the basement of a pizza parlor in Washington, D.C., and that theory led a North Carolina man named Edgar Madison Welch to travel to the nation's capital and point a rifle at an employee of the pizzeria. Since then, the trafficking ring conspiracy has grown to become an all-encompassing theory of global power, supposedly involving the Obamas, the Bushes, the Vatican, Disney, Hollywood, and the CIA, and many, many others, including the FBI, following the release of their document identifying Q as a threat. All of these groups are allegedly involved in the, quote, deep state. It's a plot to control the world, they claim. There have been other instances of Q members making headlines for acting on their beliefs. In Staten Island, a man killed a high-profile mob member because he believed he was a member of the deep state. In Sedona, Arizona, a man vandalized a Catholic church because of his beliefs that the Vatican is tied to the deep state. And in Tucson, a man interfered with water tanks left out for migrants by a humanitarian group because he believed the water was left out for members of the deep state. Most recently, an Illinois woman traveled to New York City to take out Joe Biden. She was detained for making threats and found to have more than a dozen illegal knives. The Q story itself began on October 28th of 2017, when an anonymous user named Q, whose name references Q-level clearance at the Department of Energy, made a post on 4chan, an online image board popular amongst conspiracy theorists, in a thread called, quote, "The Calm Before the Storm," end quote. The thread's name alludes to remarks made by President Trump during a White House dinner with military leaders on October 7th of 2017. After the dinner, Trump elusively told reporters that, quote, "this is the calm before the storm," end quote. When asked what he meant, he said, "You'll see." The 4chan post, released shortly after the president's remarks, claimed that Hillary Clinton was in the process of being extradited for her supposed trafficking crimes. The storm had begun. Chapter 2. Discovering Q. I remember seeing Q on CNN and Fox, and initially I didn't believe in it, my dad tells me. During a 2018 Trump rally in Tampa, Florida, which was broadcast on all of the major networks, QAnon followers stood behind Trump holding up a giant letter Q and signs in the shape of a Q imprinted with the American flag. My dad also recalls when QAnon began to pop up on 4chan and YouTube, where he spent hours on weekends and late at night looking into various conspiracy theories, from well-trod theories like whether the moon landing was faked and 9/11 was an inside job, to the more outlandish, like a theory that the U.S. government is controlled by a shape-shifting race of aliens. Q? What is that? He'd ask himself whenever he'd see posts from the anonymous user. Eventually, he no longer saw Q posts on 4chan and wondered what happened to them. After doing some investigating, he found Q on the image board 8chan, an even more unruly version of 4chan where anti-Semites, homophobes, white supremacists, and other hostile groups thrived. But then 8chan disappeared from the web altogether. Now, the real reason why 8chan was removed from the web in August of 2019 was because its network provider Cloudflare cut service after a mass shooter in El Paso, Texas posted a racist manifesto on the site days before his deadly rampage. Not the first mass shooting connected to 8chan. My dad wasn't aware of that, and to him, the major news network's dismissal of Q, 4chan's mysterious removal of the thread, and 8chan's disappearance could only mean one thing. They're trying to cover something up. Hillary Clinton never was extradited, and the storm never began, but the anonymous user named Q caught the attention of more and more members of the 4chan community, who began dissecting Q's cryptic posts to understand what was actually being said. Q followers refer to the posts as breadcrumbs. The breadcrumbs usually feature abbreviations and acronyms, which makes them difficult for followers to decipher, while some information, Q followers say, is intentionally false. None of that has stopped anons, as the followers of Q call themselves, from drawing conclusions and speculations, which they share across various social media sites. In one post, Q wrote the word mockingbird, with no context, and also included HRC detained, not arrested, yet. Followers assumed Q was referring to Operation Mockingbird, which is an early 1950s CIA program that attempted to manipulate major news networks for propaganda purposes. Now the thinking goes, major news networks were being manipulated to cover up the fact that Hillary Clinton was in detainment. Dustin Nemos, a former real estate agent from Delaware, now an anon, tells me that he was, quote, there from the very beginning and started to look at the claims as evidence, end quote. It didn't take long for him to become convinced of the legitimacy of Q's claims because, quote, there were so many coincidences, end quote. These coincidences often involved Trump himself promoting QAnon theories, either directly or indirectly, by retweeting posts by anons. Nemos relates the Q posts to a game. They play this credibility game and show they're legitimate without anyone pointing out any national security violations, he claims. Because the posts are cryptic and deliberately contain false information, Nemos believes that Q is able to avoid government officials going after them. It's almost like an intelligence operation at work. In December of 2017, Nemos created a YouTube channel where he would interpret breadcrumbs by Q. The channel was a success, gaining 50,000 subscribers, but by February of 2018, it had been banned from YouTube. I started seeing a sort of organized resistance from the fake news, he says. They were attacking it. The primary belief of Q followers is that the deep state is working against President Trump. Major media corporations are controlled by the deep state, and any criticism of Trump is made because these fake news networks are trying to protect themselves from the upcoming, quote, storm, which will bring about mass arrests. The Q movement was designed for President Trump to go around the corrupt Department of Justice the same way he goes around fake news by using Twitter, Nemos claims. Nemos reestablished his presence on YouTube in March of 2018 and has since amassed nearly 100,000 subscribers. And he's only one of many. He believes that if all the YouTubers combined their viewership, they'd have numbers that, quote, match fake news websites like CNN, end quote. There's also a network of what Nemos considers independent journalists, reporting on their findings about Q. Sarah Wiestall, a former business owner from Minnesota, is among these quote-unquote journalists. She doesn't consider herself an avid follower of Q, but she is interested in trying to figure out what it really is. Her writing wraps itself around narratives constructed by Q followers. They really want what's best for the country, she tells me. They're tired of letting the deep state control everything. Wiestall's distrust in the U.S. government began rising during the 2008 recession when she lost her business, and then set out to understand the cause by investigating the financial system. I learned how corrupt our banking system was and everything else, Wiestall tells me. She expanded her investigations to include other aspects of society and couldn't believe the information she uncovered. There's this thing called truth trauma, she says, and I've got it. Wiestall's investigations eventually led her to Jimmy Rothstein, a retired New York City Police Department officer. Rothstein told her that while he was a police officer, he worked on child trafficking cases, which led him to unearth that America's elites were involved. In 2019, Wiestall learned that the group of Anons were planning on publishing a book of their findings. She offered her interview with Rothstein, and it was accepted. The invitation to the Great Awakening was released on February 26th of 2019 and went on to become amongst the top 15 books sold on Amazon. Nemos, who also contributed to the book, was not surprised by its success. Quote, the demand for the truth was out there, end quote, he says. Chapter 3. A long, slow slide into isolation. My dad has always had an interest in aliens, a fascination with their possible existence. I remember watching science fiction movies with him late at night when I was very young, which often gave me nightmares. When I was about 8, we watched one that involved a young man in the military being abducted by aliens. The young man couldn't recall everything that had happened to him, but he would have flashbacks that played out on screen. During one of the group of gray aliens stood at the control deck, taking notes while the man was chained naked and a drill closed in on his urethra. He let out a chilling cry. My dad watched our old TV box with intrigue as the cheap sci-fi flick played. My heart raced, and then I covered my eyes. This fascination with aliens increased after the debut of the History Network show Ancient Aliens. My parents divorced when I was 9, and whenever I'd visit my father's house, he'd have hours of the show recorded. I'd watch episodes with him sometimes, and we'd talk about the possibility that aliens built the Egyptian pyramids, or whether there were giants buried in the Serpent Mountain of Adams County, Ohio, or if Hindu texts contained references to the intergalactic battle held in Earth's sky. At this point, though, it was a casual interest for him. He still also watched NASCAR and the local news, and worked on his car in the yard. Not long after my parents divorced, my dad's life came to a virtual standstill. My mom gained full custody of my twin sister and me, as well as our older brother, and my dad wasn't able to see any of us very often. He kept the same box TV, phone, and poor internet service for years. He developed paranoia about social media and the possibilities of tracking. He gradually isolated himself from the outside world. Lately, I've only known him to leave Orange County, California, every couple of years to go watch races at the Las Vegas Motor Speedway. Research suggests that conspiracy theorists tend to be isolated from their peers and turn to conspiratorial beliefs for a sense of community. This feeling of belonging, the psychological trait of wanting to be a part of something larger than the individual, is believed to be due to the lack of self-certainty. This research rings true when it comes to my dad. I'm ashamed to say that there has always been a certain distance between us. Rarely have we said "I love you" to each other, or taken an interest in each other's personal lives. It is a passive relationship, and it's one of my greatest regrets. Clearly, my dad was lonely during the years after the divorce, and that's when he turned to conspiracy theories. After 10 years of not living with my dad, my sister and I moved back into his house in 2016. My mom had decided to move to San Diego, and my sister and I, who had established our lives in Orange County, didn't want to leave. My older brother had already moved out on his own. It quickly became clear to us that our father's interest in conspiracy theories had developed into an obsession. After we moved back in, he decided to purchase a new TV. Shortly afterward, the internet, which at the time was so slow it hardly existed. It was upgraded to high speed. The fast internet and new features of the upgrade TV made the outside world much more available to him. But that wasn't necessarily a good thing. The ability to search through endless amounts of information has not opened his eyes to different possibilities. It has closed them. Travis View, a conspiracy theory researcher and co-host of the podcast Q Anonymous, tells me that he became concerned about the conspiracy group after Charlie Kirk, founder and president of the conservative nonprofit Turning Point USA, retweeted a Twitter post from Q on July 7th of 2018. Quote, "I started to realize that Q was creeping into the mainstream," end quote, View says. The tweet falsely claimed that the Department of Justice had released a chart showing that the number of human trafficking arrests under Trump had been far greater than under Obama. Kirk deleted the retweet the next day after receiving much criticism from the other prominent Twitter users like David Frum of The Atlantic. "They often told me very similar stories," View says, recounting his interviews with Q members at the January 2020 Red Pill Roadshow in Tampa, Florida. "All my life I've known something is off, that the global narratives is an illusion, and that there's something beneath the surface," they would tell him. A lot of Q people were conspiratorial before it came around, but this gave them a framework, says View. "If you believe anything off the beaten path, then you're welcome to the family." Q members believe that the cabal, or the deep state, is operated by people in the upper echelons of society who kidnap children and perform sacrificial rituals. They believe that members of the cabal record each other eating children and use it as a potential blackmail against each other. The only way that someone can enter the cabal is if they're willing to participate in these blackmail recordings to ensure that they will never betray the group. Q members tend to see every major event through this same lens. Everything leads back to this cabal. Shortly after Harvey Weinstein, whose Anons believe is part of the cabal, was convicted of rape, Bob Iger stepped down as CEO of Disney. When Q posted about the Iger resignation on 8chan, a rebranded 8kun, a rebranded version of 8chan, with the message "The Silent War Continues," Anon speculated that Iger was a member of the cabal and Weinstein was going to expose him. Although the alleged workings of the cabal sound bizarre, Dustin Nemos and Sarah Westall firmly believe it's the truth. We have our alien people, we have our conspiracy people, but most people who are part of the Q movement just want to see justice in a lawful way and see the country made great again, Nemos says. Many who follow Q attach their own conspiratorial ideas to the theory, which has led to some divisions in the ranks. The most notable division is about whether JFK Jr. is Q. On April 8th of 2018, Q wrote a post in which he linked JFK Jr. to President Trump, then referenced JFK Jr.'s death in a plane crash in 1999, and Hillary Clinton's election to the Senate in 2000. The post prompted Q members to speculate that Clinton was responsible for JFK Jr.'s death, while others posed that JFK Jr. had never died at all. Instead, these Anons now believe that Q is JFK Jr., evidenced by the fact that the shape of his gravesite resembles the letter Q. Furthermore, they believe JFK Jr.'s ultimate purpose for talking through Q is to let Q followers know that he'll be Trump's running mate in 2020. Some say that Vincent Fusca, a Q member with a large following, is actually JFK Jr. Nemos doesn't believe in that conspiracy theory within the conspiracy theory, and he even says that he has debunked it. While visiting a Trump hotel, he spotted Vincent Fusca and sized him up. JFK Jr. was 6'3", and I'm around 5'10". I took a picture with Vincent and confirmed he couldn't possibly be JFK Jr., he tells me. Yet the JFK Jr. theory has persisted among Q followers, including my dad. In this day and age, it's surprisingly easy to advance such a theory. In the past, a conspiracy theorist would have to go to a library, do some research about their theories, print out some pamphlets, and get someone else to join. View says that isn't the case anymore. Now you can make a tweet that JFK Jr. isn't dead and get thousands of retweets. Chapter 4. Going in Deep. During the 2-year period that I had lived with my dad, he always wanted to talk about conspiracy theories with me. I'd usually dismiss his theories or let them go in one ear and out the other, but sometimes I'd listen. While I was taking an astronomy course at my local community college, we learned about the moon. After class, I went home and talked to my dad about how the moon looks like it's constantly in the same position from our perspective because of the rate at which it rotates, how it lit up because of the sun shining on it, and how it has different phases because of its rotation around the earth. My dad interjected, "That's what you were told to believe." To him, the moon is a hollow object that is either created by the government or was put there by some alien force. In 2018, I moved out to attend the University of California, Irvine. I don't live far from my dad now. It's only a 30-minute drive. I occasionally visit to talk about school and see how he's doing. Each visit, though, he seems to be falling deeper into the conspiratorial abyss. One day, I told him about a story I did for my school's radio station about China's efforts to grow life on the dark side of the moon. "You think that's all they've got up there?" my dad responded. He proceeded to show me pictures of a military base that has supposedly been established on the moon. The pictures were grainy, and to my eyes they were clearly a rock formation that merely looked like buildings, but he genuinely believed them to be proof. Again, I didn't know what to say. The encounters were frustrating because he'd go on for hours connecting each theory and explaining that the government was trying to keep people from knowing this information. Something happened, though, and at the time I didn't realize that it was because he'd become heavily invested in the overreaching Q conspiracy theory. He had stopped watching major news networks entirely and was now consumed by information about numerous intersecting conspiracies. He began talking about the Vatican, top government officials being involved in a pedophile ring, the significance of JFK Jr.'s satanic rituals, and of course, Hillary Clinton. By now my dad's beliefs were driving him further away from his family. My sister continued living with him after I went away to school. Periodically, she'd send me text messages saying that he was scaring her and she didn't know what to do. Whenever he'd get off to work, he'd watch conspiracy theories videos on YouTube that purported to explain how various world events were connected. He persisted in trying to show them to her, and whenever she'd turn him down, he became frustrated and would yell at her, insisting, "This is what's wrong with your generation. None of you want to know the truth about how the world works." Then my older brother came to visit our dad along with his wife and 2 daughters, one of whom was born late last year. It was shortly after the news had broken about Jeffrey Epstein having committed suicide. The event plagued my dad's mind because of his belief that Epstein was a member of the deep state. Rather than speak with his son and grandchildren, he went on a rant about the government's involvement with Epstein and other conspiracies. Frustrated, my brother told him to stop, which he did. Then he asked if he could show them something. He played a YouTube video that showed images of violence and destruction along with an ominous message: the government is trying to kill everybody. "Dad, can you turn that off, please? Nobody wants to hear that," my brother told him. I also went to visit my dad shortly after Epstein's death. At the time, my sister was planning a trip to Spain to hike the Camino de Santiago, a 500-mile trek through the northern part of the country. She'd spent months planning the trip, but hadn't told my dad. She was nervous that he'd tell her not to go, and she feared he'd be jealous that she was going on the journey with my mom's new husband. While I was visiting, she finally built up the gumption to tell him a week before she was supposed to leave. He was taken aback and seemed in disbelief. When he asked her why, she responded, "Because I feel like I haven't done anything with my life." With tears welling up, she added, "I feel like I'm stuck." My dad became rageful and yelled at her, "You're stuck. Your life is stuck. I've been stuck for 20 years. He hounded her, trying to look her in the face as she stared at the cement floor, tears falling. He stuck out his index finger while clutching the others and pointed it directly at his temple. "Every single day I want to put a bullet in my head." My sister went to her room crying, and I stayed with my dad in the garage. He was audibly annoyed, but still expressed worry about his daughter. After some time, he pulled out his laptop and showed me another conspiracy theory. This made me consider that perhaps conspiracy theories were a way for him to escape his surrounding world, allowing him to avoid the reality of his life. My dad had had a lonely childhood. His own father had left the family when my dad was young, and his mother was emotionally detached. From what I've been able to piece together, he seemed to rely on the guidance of others to mold his worldview. Often taking whatever information was handed to him, he told me that while growing up he encountered many Vietnam veterans who told him crazy shit, and he's talked often about his first boss, who seems to have left quite an impression on him. He was a skilled mechanic even when he was still in high school. He often reminisces about the time an auto shop owner came to his 10th grade class and asked, "Who's the best mechanic in this school?" My dad instantly stood up. "I am. There's not a single person here who knows a car as well as I do." Satisfied by the answer, the shop owner offered him an apprenticeship. This shop owner, an older man with red hair and a Scottish drawl my dad still likes to poke fun at, became a source of guidance for him. He gave my dad the opportunity to practice his future profession and also offered musings on life and provided alcohol. I imagine my dad standing in the garage of an auto shop, sipping a beer with this Scottish man standing before him. "Drills blare and hydraulic jacks move cars up and down. Listen, kid, there's a lot you don't understand about the world," he tells him. I imagine my dad in that pivotal moment. I picture him feeling hesitant, then thinking to himself, maybe he's right. Chapter 5. Taking the Red Pill. Anons refer to believing in the cabal as being red-pilled. The idea comes from the science fiction film The Matrix, in which Morpheus, a futuristic rebel, gives a regular cubicle worker named Thomas Anderson, the soon-to-be Neo, the option to take either a red pill or a blue pill. The blue pill will keep him ignorant, returning him to the world as he has always known it, while the red pill will strip away the facade and awaken him to the shocking truth about reality. The parallel of political party colors is obvious as well, as followers of Q tend to be Republican. The idea of waking up from a dreamlike state and confronting reality isn't anything new. It stems back at least as far as the ancient Greeks, notably to Plato's Allegory of the Cave, which tells the story of a group of prisoners forced to interpret the world based on the shadows they see projected on the wall of a cave. One prisoner decides that he wants to see the outside, breaks free, and goes on an intellectual journey to understand the true meaning of the world. He eventually returns to urge the other prisoners to leave, but they dismiss him and threaten to kill him if he tries to set them free. It's essentially about humans being willfully blind for fear of learning the true nature of the world. In 21st century America, the shadows on the cave wall are mass media networks, which the general public, who are the prisoners, are forced to watch because of the cabal. The Anons view themselves as those who have escaped the cave. It's ironic because the cryptic posts that Q provides his followers act as shadows. The modern world has become insular, and people are able to dictate what information they feed themselves. Anons choose Q. The problem with Q, according to Travis' view, is that they're saying to reject everything. Don't trust any outside sources, except what we provide for you. They believe that once the oncoming storm that Trump elusively mentioned in 2017 is complete, it will bring about a great awakening, a period when mass arrests will occur and people wake up to the way things really are, as Nemos puts it. I try to imagine what it would be like to believe in this alternative narrative. Would it be terrifying? As the illness has taken hold of the world, major news networks have tirelessly reported on its unfolding. But Anons and independent journalists who look to Q for guidance have reported on the pandemic in a different way. Although Q has been silent about the virus, Anons have decided to construct their own narrative about what the outbreak implies. They believe that the virus is the storm they've been expecting. While some Anons believe lockdown restrictions have been put in place for the deep state to exercise their authority and have taken to the streets to protest, others say it was introduced to the public as a military operation to weed out members of the cabal. The only people who can be affected by the virus are those who have drunk the blood of children. People like Tom Hanks aren't actually being quarantined when they contract the virus, but rather arrested. Some followers have gone a step further and said that the stay-at-home orders are in place so that the military can rescue children who are being held captive underground by the cabal. Vincent Fusca, the man some Anons believe is JFK Jr., supports the theory. 35,000 and many more to come, he tweeted, recently supposedly a reference to the number of children rescued, with a link to the article written by an independent journalist. On one Q-Focus website my dad visits, the creator made a meme of Pepe frogs wearing MAGA hats, sitting in a theater with President Trump handing out popcorn and telling them to enjoy the show. The meme alludes to the spread of the illness, and the posts that follow showed executive orders that President Kennedy signed authorizing seizures of public property in the event of an emergency. These posts are what prompted my dad to hurry off to my brother's house with his dire warning about the government this March. Our democracy is predicted on being suspicious about power. Timothy Mulley, a professor of English at Miami University and author of several books exploring the history of conspiracy theories, tells me. Whether it's Obama or Trump, we're supposed to say, wait a minute, I want to know for myself. The problem, though, he explains, is that President Trump is actually willing to personally articulate at his rallies that there are government deep state elements that are deliberately trying to take him down and undermine him. What happens when a nation's leader is conspiratorial? People who are susceptible to conspiracy theories become manipulated and go into overdrive because a person in power finally represents them. People like my dad lose themselves. Dad, if you're reading this, please know that I love you, and I'm concerned for your well-being. I'm sorry for not always being there for you, emotionally as your son, and taking you for granted. The world right now is a terrifying, confusing place, and the weight of it all can be crushing and demoralizing. But I can't stand by and watch you give yourself to this groupthink filled with false hopes, while also knowing there are so many others like you. For readers who also have family members who've dabbled or who are lost in conspiratorial thinking, please consider them as human beings. Think about why they have shunned themselves into a world of lies. And what can we do to help them? In February, I texted my dad to ask if I could interview him about conspiracy theories. He messaged me back saying you mean conspiracy facts, and are you sure you want to be red-pilled? I told him yes, I'm ready for it. I meet with him on February 27, 2020, and he is eager to talk. Our conversation begins in his garage with his mechanic tools and NASCAR memorabilia on the wall. The pickled alien looks over us all. We both light cigarettes and I sit near an engine block he's been working on for years. Before he delves into our talk about conspiracy theories, he tells me to look up a song. It's David Gilmour's There's No Way Out of Here. Okay, I want you to listen to the lyrics in the song, he tells me. The song opens with a guitar strum and a lonely harmonica that pulses with low tones. There's no way out of here. When you come in, you're in for good, Gilmour sings in an apathetic voice. Okay, who wrote this song, he asks. Gilmour, I responded. That's what everybody believes, but the guy's named Ken Baker. Who is Ken Baker? I shrug my shoulders. Ah, he lets out. Why is it that nobody knows who Ken Baker is? If you look online, you can't find a single thing about this guy. Keep listening to the lyrics. There are no answers here. When you look out, you don't see in, Gilmore sings. My dad gestures at him and tells me that there's an energy being held captive in the body, and that this energy moves from body to body during various lifespans. Like reincarnation, I ask him? Some people call it that, but who's keeping that energy in there? I shrug again. There's people out there who are trying to keep this information from the world. Now, what happened to Ken Baker? My dad asks me again, but he quickly answers his own question. They took him out because he was trying to expose the truth. My dad looks at me in the eyes. His face is tired with age, and he looks confused. This shit's heavy, Reed. You don't realize how deep it goes. You want to talk conspiracies? We'll talk. Yes, it's heavy and it hurts, I want to tell him, but I love you, and I'm sorry that I won't take the red pill. I hope you can find your way back home. This particular story spoke to me because of what we see on a daily cycle on the Virgo Triad channel and the Virgo Triad website. Not just people falling for conspiracies, but falling into a cycle of the scams of the Sovsits and Moors that actually are really conspiracies in addition. It cycles them down rabbit holes that they can't find their way out of. Over the last 4 years that I've done work on this channel, I've witnessed a pediatric nurse that lost her husband to conspiracy theories. He literally quit his job. 6 months later, she was having to carry her mortgage, 2 cars, and every bill in the household on her own. He wouldn't even get off the computer to watch his own children. She ended up having to divorce him. I have witnessed people lose their parents, their spouses, their sisters, their brothers, their friends. This is becoming an issue. The conspiracy theories of things like Q and scams like the Sovsit movement, the redemption scam, what the Moors are spreading, these things are damaging. Families are being split up on a daily basis, and they're becoming more and more prevalent all over the internet. Please, everyone, share this podcast. Mine or the original. It matters not to me, as long as it gets out there. We have to start warning people that if you're on the ledge of jumping into a rabbit hole, think twice. Because this is what has happened to people in the past who have jumped down the same rabbit hole. They get lost, and sometimes it seems they never come home. I love all of you, and I hope you have a wonderful day. I'll be back on Friday for the Odd Couple show with Chuck and Virgo on the Odd Couple channel. I hope everyone has a great day and enjoyed this little story. Bye-bye.